For centuries, people have raised structures that stop the world in its tracks, and a number of them sit among the most exposed and precarious places humans have ever occupied. A dam whose reservoir is said to shave a fraction of a microsecond from Earth's daily spin. A mountain hut balanced on a knife edge of rock high in the Alps. A narrow path bolted straight onto a sheer cliff face where every footfall hangs above empty air. Is this the height of engineering skill, or ambition stretched past every sensible limit? The locations ahead will make that question hard to answer. A tower of many thousands of tons has been tilting for nearly 8.5 centuries. The Leaning Tower of Pisa rises almost 57 meters, yet its foundations reach only about 3 meters into soft layers of sand, clay, and silt. By the time the third story was finished, the ground had already begun to settle unevenly, and the lean was underway. Century after century, the weight pressed harder on the lower side until the top stood more than 5 meters off true vertical. In 1990, the structure was closed. Engineers placed hundreds of tons of lead as counterweight, strengthened the base, and carefully removed soil from the higher side. Step by step, the tilt was reduced. The tower still stands, an accidental masterpiece that became the city's most recognizable emblem. If the vast body of water held behind this wall ever escaped control, the effects would reach far beyond the dam itself and reshape the lower reaches of China's longest river. The Three Gorges Dam stretches more than 2.3 kilometers across the Yangtze and rises 185 meters high. Behind it lies a reservoir containing tens of billions of cubic meters of water that presses against the concrete every hour of every day. Scientists have calculated that the mass of that water can slow Earth's rotation by roughly 0.06 microseconds per day and shift the planet's rotational pole by about 2 centimeters. The same structure houses the world's largest hydroelectric station by capacity. One dam alters the river's flow and leaves a measurable imprint on the planet. High in the Alps, a compact building seems to balance on a rocky pinnacle. The Cabane de Bertol sits on rock too narrow for outward expansion, so the structure rises in 4 stacked levels. From almost every angle, the walls open onto empty space. Entry requires climbing successive steel ladders fixed directly to the cliff. Each ladder leads only to the next, with nothing but rock and air below. The main door opens straight onto that ladder system. Inside, the refuge can sleep roughly 80 people at more than 3,300 meters elevation. It still serves climbers in a place where weather, altitude, and terrain oppose any ordinary building. In the middle of the Aegean, a solitary rock pillar rises from the waves. No beach, no harbor, only constant surf striking from every side. At its summit stands Torlightus Lighthouse, one of the few lights built on a rock completely detached from land. The structure occupies only the limited space the rock itself provides. Every storm and swell strikes the foundation directly. Maintenance depends entirely on sea conditions. No road leads here. The original 19th century lighthouse was destroyed in the Second World War and rebuilt on the same spot in 1994. More than a century later, it continues to face relentless motion of wind and water, an achievement simply to keep a light standing on such an isolated pillar. A shelter with almost no solid ground beneath it clings to a cliff in Italy's Dolomites. Bivacco Buffa di Pereiro sits at about 2,160 meters, held by steel anchors and heavy bolts driven into the rock. Below, the mountainside falls away nearly vertically. Inside, there is room for only a few overnight guests. The sections were prefabricated in the valley, flown up and assembled on the cliff face. Access is by the Ivano de Bona via Ferrata, one of the best-known protected climbing routes in the range. The only practical alternative is helicopter. A tiny refuge suspended in air and kept in place by engineering alone. 2 cliffs face each other across a canyon nearly 170 meters deep. Far below, the Tara River appears as a thin ribbon. 5 concrete arches leap the gap. The whole bridge measures 365 meters, its largest arch spanning 116 meters without intermediate support. When finished in 1940, it was Europe's largest concrete arch road bridge. The deck carries both vehicles and pedestrians with almost no space at the edges to pause. A glance over the rail reveals the full depth of the canyon underfoot. Every crossing load travels through those 5 arches, a structure designed to hang over open air for more than 8 decades. Most hotels stand where they are easy to reach. Escher sits in almost the opposite setting, a narrow ledge on the Alpstein slopes in Switzerland. A vertical rock wall rises immediately behind. The ground falls steeply into the valley in front. Portions of the building are supported by the rock itself, the roof and walls fitting beneath an overhanging ledge. Outside the door, the terrain quickly becomes steep slopes and narrow, rocky paths. No road reaches the site. The shortest approach begins with a cable car, continues through the wild Kirchley caves, then follows a mountainside trail for another 15 to 20 minutes. Despite the setting, the inn welcomes guests for several months each year, a hotel placed where most people would expect only bare cliff. Massive sandstone pillars rise straight from the plain of central Greece. Their summits offer only enough space for a few small buildings. Nearly every side drops in sheer cliffs. The meteor monasteries occupy these heights, some more than 300 meters above the base. Limited space forced terraces, balconies, and walkways to the very edges. A few steps beyond the walls, the ground falls into the valley. Visitors climb stairways cut into the rock. Some entrances are linked by short bridges from cliff face to gate. Even today, certain monasteries still use cable hoists to lift food and supplies where vehicles cannot go. More than 6 centuries later, the buildings remain perched on summits almost completely isolated from the ground below, one of Europe's most striking architectural ensembles. At the Kakum Canopy Walkway, no concrete columns rise from the forest floor. Ancient trees themselves serve as the anchor points for load-bearing cables. Between them hang wooden suspension bridges high above the canopy. Located in Kakum National Park, Ghana, the route measures about 350 meters and comprises 7 spans linking tree to tree at roughly 40 meters height. Each span is just over 30 centimeters wide, barely room for one person. Wooden planks, protective netting, and steel cables form the path. Every step sends vibrations through the structure. From the first span to the last, the walker remains almost entirely at treetop level. More than 20 years after opening it, remains one of the oldest operating canopy walkways in Africa. El Caminito del Rey was never intended for tourists. It was built in the early 20th century so workers could move between 2 hydroelectric plants at opposite ends of the El Chorro Gorge in southern Spain. Its most dramatic stretch follows the cliff face roughly 100 meters above the river. Some sections measure only about 1 meter wide, with rock wall on one side and a sheer drop on the other. Steel beams and bolts drilled deep into the rock support the walkway. Looking down makes the height immediately clear. After decades of decay, large sections of concrete cracked and fell. The path was closed. A new walkway now runs above the original, yet the remaining fragments still clinging to the cliff show how precarious the old route once was. The Dachstein stairway to nothingness does not climb toward a summit. 14 steel steps lead downward beyond the cliff edge to a small glass platform that projects fully from the mountainside. Beneath it lies a drop of nearly 400 meters. Standing on the glass reveals the rocky slope far below. The structure sits at about 2,700 meters in Austria's Dachstein range, fully exposed to weather. Snow and ice can coat the steps. Even a thin, slippery layer makes every movement tense. No columns rise from the valley. The entire load returns into the cliff through steel beams and anchors. Hundreds of thousands of visitors each year stand at one of the most exposed viewpoints in the Alps. Pajama Castle was not built on a hilltop, but into the mouth of a vast cave. A mountain more than 120 meters high rises behind it. A nearly vertical cliff drops in front. Only one side of the castle faces the open air. The other 3 are enclosed by rock. Behind the rear rooms, a passage enters a natural cave system that runs more than 14 kilometers through the mountain. For centuries, that passage brought supplies into the castle whenever the main entrance was besieged. The landscape itself became a fortress almost impossible to take by direct assault, yet the entire complex depends on the narrow space between cliff and cave mouth. From a distance, the Monte Rosa hut resembles a giant metal crystal more than a conventional mountain cabin. It sits at nearly 2,900 meters on the edge of Switzerland's Gorner Glacier. No road, no power grid, no external water supply reaches the site. Every component was flown in by helicopter and assembled on location. The multifaceted aluminum skin reflects light from every angle, helping capture solar energy while limiting heat loss in the cold. Solar panels supply most electricity. Water collection and wastewater systems allow the hut to meet roughly 90% of its own needs. In an environment where survival itself is demanding, the building continues to operate almost independently for months at a time. On the Macau Tower skywalk, the only security is a safety line clipped to an overhead track. The walkway sits about 233 meters above the ground and measures roughly 1.8 meters wide as it circles the outer edge of the observation deck. One side is the tower, the other drops straight to the streets below. The structure is fully open, no glass walls, no conventional guardrails. Participants can stand at the edge or lean outward. With a path less than 2 meters across, the design turns the tower's exterior into a walkable perimeter, an arrangement still uncommon among modern high-rises. Few dams are deliberately designed to create controlled floods, yet Xiaolangdi does so almost every year. Built on the Yellow River, one of the world's most sediment-laden rivers, the dam faces constant silt buildup that would otherwise reduce its flood control capacity. From the outset, it was equipped with large bottom outlets located deep below the waterline. When activated, multiple gates open together and release water at thousands of cubic meters per second. The high-pressure flow carries enormous quantities of sediment downstream, producing dramatic plumes and powerful currents. A single operation can move tens to hundreds of millions of tons of silt. Since 2002, these artificial floods have become a regular part of the dam's management, allowing it both to store water and to keep the river's channel functioning. Every brick, every stone, every drop of water that once sustained life on Sigiriya had to be carried nearly 180 meters upward. The isolated rock rises almost sheer from the plains of Sri Lanka. In the 5th century, its summit held a royal palace, fortifications, water gardens, and living quarters. Space existed for a full complex, yet nearly every side ends in cliffs. The ascent begins at the base with stone steps that join steel stairways fixed to the rock face. Some sections pass between massive boulders, others hang against the cliff. Foundations of the palace and the ancient reservoir system remain visible at the top. Constructing and sustaining a settlement in such a place alone marks Sigiriya as one of the boldest engineering efforts of the ancient world. This bridge is narrower than the shoulder width of many adults, yet it spans nearly half a kilometer across the Alps. The Charles Koenen suspension bridge measures 494 meters in length. Its walkway is only 65 centimeters wide. The entire span crosses the Gruben and Goms ravines without intermediate supports. Below lies a drop of about 85 meters. The deck is steel grating, so every step reveals the valley floor. Steel cables and a vibration damping system keep the bridge stable, even when alpine winds approach 180 kilometers per hour. The previous bridge at the site was destroyed by rockfall. The new one was placed higher and completed in roughly 10 weeks. A span of nearly 500 meters, only 65 centimeters wide, yet capable of carrying hundreds of people across one of Switzerland's most rugged landscapes. The Glacier Skywalk projects beyond a cliff edge on a curved steel platform. Below lies the Sunwapta Valley, about 280 meters down. Located in Canada's Jasper National Park, the horseshoe-shaped deck extends roughly 35 meters from the mountainside. Steel beams and anchors drill deep into the rock transfer every load back into the cliff, allowing the platform to hang without columns beneath. The floor is high-strength laminated glass. The valley floor is visible directly underfoot, separated by only that layer of glass from a drop of hundreds of meters. In a canyon in western Norway, a stepped bridge crosses Vuringsfossen waterfall. 99 connected steel steps form a walkway about 47 meters long, whose ends are offset by nearly 16 meters, following the slope of the terrain to link two viewpoints. Directly below, the waterfall plunges about 182 meters into the Mobudalen Valley. Each section is anchored deep into bedrock, keeping the bridge stable on steep ground while exposed to constant mist. Completed in 2020, it turned a gap once divided by the falls into a pedestrian crossing and one of Europe's more unusual bridge designs. In the middle of Tokyo Bay, the roadway disappears beneath the surface and cars continue for several kilometers without seeing the sky. The Tokyo Bay Aqualine links Kawasaki and Kisarazu over roughly 15.1 kilometers, of which about 9.6 kilometers run through an underwater tunnel. The remainder continues on a bridge. It ranks among the world's longest combined tunnel and bridge systems. The tunnel lies deep beneath the seabed, keeping it clear of busy shipping lanes. Continuous ventilation, water pumps, and emergency systems maintain safe conditions. At the midpoint, an artificial island, Umihotaru, serves as both rest area and transition between tunnel and bridge, a route whose most complex section lies entirely underwater. More than 500 wooden steps change direction repeatedly along a nearly vertical limestone cliff in Spain's Aragon region. Two large stairway sections rise in multiple levels high above the reservoir below. Some segments stand dozens of meters above the water. The path is pedestrian width only. Steel beams support each wooden tread. Anchors are drilled deep into the rock. Cable railings run along the outer edge. Every element is designed to carry load while suspended above the canyon. The walkways reconnect Montfalcot with the Mont Rebet Gorge after the reservoir severed the original route. Instead of cutting a road through the mountain, engineers moved the path onto the cliff face, a massive staircase that follows the rock while hanging high above the drop. Two rocky summits at Glacier 3000 are joined by a suspension bridge 107 meters long. The space between the railings is only 80 centimeters, so walkers move almost in single file. Peak Walk by Tissot links the viewpoint to Sex Rouge in Switzerland. The deck is steel grating that reveals the mountainside below. Two main cables support the span across fully exposed terrain regularly struck by strong winds, snow, and ice. The bridge opens only after weather checks and can close at once if conditions turn unsafe. It is currently the only suspension bridge that directly connects two mountain peaks. Opened in 2014, it replaced a cable car crossing with a pedestrian walkway. At the summit of France's Aiguille du Midi, a glass chamber extends beyond the observation deck. The site stands at about 3,842 meters. The mountainside and glaciers of the Mont Blanc Massif fall away more than 1,000 meters below. Floor, ceiling, and three walls are glass, each panel 3 layers thick, each layer roughly 12 millimeters. A steel frame supports the structure at the platform edge. The skywalk is engineered for winds up to about 220 kilometers per hour, and temperature swings of around 60 degrees Celsius between seasons. Opened in 2013 after 3 years of work, it turns a high mountain edge into a place where visitors can step directly beyond the cliff. The approach to Berg Hokosterwitz winds around a steep limestone outcrop, passing through a succession of gates. 14 defensive gates stand between the plain and the summit. The fortress occupies a rock about 160 meters high in Austria's Carinthia region, commanding the entire plain below. Steep terrain leaves only one route upward. Each gate is placed at a different level. Stone walls, tight bends, and the constant climb slow any advance. After clearing one gate, several more layers of defense remain. Thanks to its position and design, the castle has never fallen to direct assault, the road itself forming the first line of protection. A curved platform of concrete and steel projects beyond the mountainside on the slopes of Ravna Vlaška in Croatia. At about 1,228 meters elevation, the horseshoe-shaped deck extends roughly 11 meters past the cliff. Steep rock faces drop toward the Adriatic coast. Steel beams and anchors drilled into bedrock transfer the weight of the overhang back into the mountain, allowing the platform to hang without forward columns. A glass floor reveals the open space directly beneath. Transparent railings leave almost nothing between the visitor and the air ahead. Opened in 2020, the Biokovo Skywalk turns the edge of the mountain into an observation deck suspended completely beyond the cliff. Height and transparency making many people pause before the next step. At times, the piers of the Millau Viaduct vanish completely, leaving only the roadway floating across a sea of white cloud. The phenomenon occurs frequently in southern France, where the bridge spans the Tarn River Valley and fog gathers along the canyon floor. As the cloud rises, most of the structure below disappears. 7 massive concrete piers support the deck. The tallest reaches 343 meters, taller than the Eiffel Tower. A cable-stayed system keeps the bridge stable in the strong winds that sweep the elevation. On certain days, drivers see little more than the road ahead. The ground vanishes on both sides, replaced by cloud and sky. Building a bridge across open water is demanding. Keeping it serviceable for decades in salt water is harder still. That challenge shaped the Jinghai Bay Bridge from the drawing board onward. The crossing stretches more than 6 kilometers across the bay at Dalian, employing several structural forms chosen for specific conditions. Sea winds blow year-round, salt spray settles continuously, humidity remains high, all accelerating corrosion. Steel receives multiple protective coatings. Concrete is formulated to slow seawater reaching the reinforcement. Dozens of piers stand in the sea, bearing traffic, waves, and wind day and night for decades. The bridge was designed not merely to cross the water, but to endure the environment that surrounds it from the first day. Before this bridge existed, the valley formed a gap almost impossible for a railway to cross. The Mala Rijeka Viaduct carries the Belgrade Bar Line in Montenegro. Nearly 500 meters long, the railway deck stands about 200 meters above the valley floor. When completed in 1973, it was the tallest railway viaduct in the world. 5 massive concrete piers support it. The tallest rises more than 130 meters. Each span had to be assembled at extreme height before being joined into a continuous track. Trains still cross every day, covering in less than a minute a gap that once ranked among the greatest obstacles on the entire route. Some valleys are so deep that simply getting a single cable across becomes an engineering problem of its own. In Hubei province, the terrain made conventional cranes impractical. Engineers used a rocket to carry the first guide cable over the gorge, an approach that sounded closer to science fiction than standard practice. That first cable allowed successive larger bundles to be pulled across. Towers and the main cable system took shape until the suspension bridge linked the 2 mountainsides without any pier rising from the valley floor. The roadway stands nearly 500 meters above the river. Opened in 2009, the Sidu River Bridge remains one of the highest suspension bridges on Earth. Above the surface, a busy strait carries constant shipping. Below, a railway tunnel bores through rock that could crack and admit seawater at any moment. The Seikan Tunnel links Japan's islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. It stretches nearly 54 kilometers, more than 23 of them beneath the floor of the Suguru Strait. Its lowest point lies about 240 meters below sea level. Construction began in 1971 and lasted almost 20 years. Engineers excavated through multiple rock layers under the seabed while groundwater continuously entered, forcing repeated expansion of drainage and reinforcement systems. Even after opening, strict safety measures remain. Emergency escape routes, ventilation sensors, and stopping areas protect trains inside a passage whose portals lie dozens of kilometers away. Human ingenuity and determination truly appear to have few boundaries. We have not merely found ways around natural obstacles, we have placed some of our most remarkable works at the very edge of risk. After seeing these places, which one left the strongest impression? If you could stand in only one of them, which would you choose? Share your answer in the comments. If journeys like this hold your interest, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you catch the next exploration.